Reagan's election was no surprise. You voted for Nixon twice. Why? Because you're stupid!
Blame it on the black folks. Blame it on the Jews.
Blame it on
anyone that's not like you.
You can blame it on the rich.
Blame it on the green, but you'll never blame the
Blame
man
on the
who
men who
pulls
pull the
the
strings.
You must be stupid. You must be stupid, 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 stupid.
TV preachers quote the Lord. They say, beat your plowshares into swords. Live your life a Christian way. Send them money and you'll be saved. Why?
Because you're stupid! Blame it on the black folks. Blame it on the Jews. Blame it on anybody
not like you. You can blame it on the rich.
Blame it on the green, but you'll never put the blame on the men who pull the strings. You must be stupid. You must be stupid, 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 stupid.
So good evening and welcome to this special event celebrating the 60th anniversary of the San Francisco Mime Troupe. It's so great to see you all here. Such a nice house. We have been trying to put this show together over the past couple of days. I mean, a lot of the work has gone into it well before, but trying to put it all together has been, and you're not going to notice any seams, any rough edges, anything like that. It's my honor tonight to try to briefly put into some kind of perspective the place of the Mime Troupe in San Francisco history, Bay Area theater history, U.S. theater history, what there is to celebrate. For one thing, I think most people don't realize it. Somehow, I always have trouble believing it's actually true. But I believe the Mime Troupe is the oldest professional, continually operating professional theater company in the Bay Area, in Northern California, for all I know. Now, by professional, I mean a company that paid its actors as opposed to, the companies where most of the fun is for the people actually doing the shows and their immediate relatives rather than the audiences. And that was true even in the early days when paying the actors usually meant that, we passed the hat and split the proceeds in the park after each show. But I think the major reason to celebrate the Mime Troupe is all that it has done over the years to shape and inspire the entire Bay Area theater scene and much of what we know of as contemporary American culture. So let's start at the very beginning. October 29th, 1959 was the very first performance of the R.G. Davis Mime Studio and Troupe. You'll notice that's Mime Studio, which became the San Francisco Mime Troupe some 3 years later, and it has remained the Mime Troupe in the minds of some of us old-timers, but it's mostly known as the Mime Troupe today. But whichever you call it, the Mime Troupe, if we can set the scene for when Ronnie Davis first arrived and established this company, The Bay Area was a pretty different place in those days. Much smaller population, still agricultural areas around the Bay, in what's now known as Silicon Valley, in between San Jose and Los Gatos, and in between San Jose and Hayward and San Leandro. There were still agricultural fields, as well as in the North Bay and in parts of the Far East Bay. In those days, women couldn't ride on the outside of cable cars. Men mostly wore neckties. You could smoke in the movies. And I can't begin to remember how many daily newspapers there were published every day in the Bay Area then. It was, in many respects, a very conservative area. San Francisco was a Republican city. Berkeley was a Republican city. Oakland was a very far right-wing Republican city in terms of its government, which was pretty much run behind the scenes by the publisher of the Oakland Tribune, William Noland, former senator, former governor, and pretty much the head of the far right wing of the Republican Party then, which of course would be called the liberal wing of the Republican Party today. But San Francisco had a long-standing, very significant progressive presence, particularly culturally, but it was a very strong union town. Much of that feeding off of the Longshoremen. Harry Bridges was still running the Longshoremen's union. The remnants of the old Barbary Coast freewheeling kind of culture were still here and mixed in with the Beats, who had pretty much made San Francisco the center of their activities around Ferlinghetti's City Light bookstore. And you had the poetry readings, and you had jazz, very lively jazz scene in San Francisco in the 50s. You had the comedy clubs. You used to have the drag clubs. And you still had a very strong modern dance tradition going in San Francisco. You already had maybe the nation's first progressive radio station, KPFA, operating out of Berkeley. I believe the first listener-sponsored radio station in the country. You had the SF Tape Center, which was a center for progressive experimentation in music. You had a whole new rising scene of San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California painters and sculptors, and you had the one really major theater company in San Francisco, the Actors Workshop, which was one of that first wave of regional repertory theater companies, and it was one of the most progressive, introducing Pinter I believe to America, one of the first companies to do Beckett, and then to do Beckett at Alcatraz, to actually work with training a prisoner theater company in Alcatraz. Not Alcatraz, I'm sorry, in San Quentin. I'm a little confused there. And you had a rising tide of progressive political anti-reaction backlash against the McCarthyism that had been so dominant through much of the 1950s. So you had what attracted, I think, many people to the Bay, many young people like myself back then, was seeing the films of the Anti-House Un-American Activities Committee hearings when they held hearings in San Francisco to expose all the commies in our midst. They found the commies running around free on the steps of City Hall and protesting and having to be washed away with fire hoses, and this being filmed, and kids at campuses all around the country seeing films of this and thinking, that looks like a pretty good idea. And in that first period of the 1960s, in the course of this evening, we're going to go kind of decade by decade, and you will have different people presenting some of the history of the mime troupe during those decades, and you'll be seeing scenes and songs performed from shows, mime troupe shows from those decades. Excuse me. So during the 60s, you had a huge rise in political activity in the Bay Area, as we all know, and those anti-HUAC riots translated into the large civil rights demonstrations on Auto Row and protesting around the Oakland Tribune, the aforementioned Oakland Tribune, because it would not hire non-whites, which included, by the way, in those days, Jews, and as well as, of course, African Americans and Asian Americans. So, lost my way, got ahead of myself. The Bay Area was nourished by and reacted to this entire cultural mix that I've kind of laid out, and worked with a lot of the other people, collaboratively, the other artists in other disciplines through that area. And that worked with a whole lot of people who were already becoming pretty well established, like William Wiley and Robert Hudson, the filmmaker Robert Nelson. And then you had people who were young, early starting composers like Stephen Reich, who worked for several years with the Mime Troupe, doing sound design as well as composing scores. You had work with writers like the radical journalist Saul Landau, who wrote the Mime Troupe's seminal and very important The Minstrel Show, or Civil Rights in a Cracker Barrel. And also working with, on tour or doing shows with writers such as Ferlinghetti, Allen Ginsberg, and the still active radical journalist Robert Scheer. So Steve Reich is just one example of many important artists who came up out of the troupe. And I'm not going to try to go into all of them, but many of them are familiar names, from Peter Coyote to the actor Barry Henley, known as Shabaka, to Lee Brewer and Ruth Malachek, who after a couple of years here, they'd been working with the workshop before they started working with Ronnie and the Mime Troupe, moved to New York, co-founded Mabou Minds, and were active, have continued to be active in the vanguard of avant-garde theater in New York pretty much ever since. I should say the late Ruth Malachek, but Lee Brewer is still active. But it wasn't just the artists that came out of the Mime Troupe. There were a bunch of important cultural movements and theatrical movements that came out of the troupe. I know you'll hear about some of that as we go along, but a few that I wanted to mention. There was a young man named Luis Valdez who came to the Mime Troupe directly from college at San Jose State. Worked with the Mime Troupe for 1 year, and then went off to Delano to work with the Grape Workers Union and Cesar Chavez, and he founded El Teatro Campesino, which became the first of a whole movement of teatros around the country. And in many ways, I think that the success of the teatro movement helped inspire other identity theater groups, ranging from the Jewish theaters to the African American theaters, the Asian American Theater Company, and to the gay theaters that began to form toward the end of the 70s here. You had, the Mime Troupe was touring widely in those days, which was a huge source of both inspiration and spreading and of income for the troupe, touring to college campuses all across the country. And in doing that, they tended not only to spark anti-war demonstrations on campuses around the country with plays like Le Mont Militaire, but also to inspire many young progressive artists who were moved to come here, many with the idea of joining the mime troupe, many with the idea of starting their own kinds of mime troupes. And some of them became other progressive companies that moved off in different directions, doing new theater, maybe new political theater from Europe, or new political theater of this kind or the other, and others into experimental theaters, and others like Larry Pizzoni and Peggy Snyder, who came here to work with the mime troupe, decided to hone their circus skills and founded the Pickle Family Circus, which became the inspiration for a whole range of one-ring theater companies with no animals all across this country, and moving on into other, and you can still see them. You still see them, we see them coming from Canada and from Australia and from all these other places, but that movement is still alive. But some people like Bill Irwin and Jeff Hoyle left that movement and founded the new vaudeville movement, which became its own ongoing whole form of theater rediscovery. I also wanted to mention that during that, out in the lobby, I saw that you'll see this photo behind the Mime Boutique, which you really should visit. The photo of the bust in the park, where you see the cops. You can see Ronnie Davis in his white mime suit, his white commedia suit, being hustled out of the park by a cop, and a couple of other people being one of them being the lawyer, being pushed ahead of him. And this was the big bust in the park. Actually, Ronnie went on for Luis, who was supposed to be the first person on stage in that show, but who didn't want to get busted at that time. And Ronnie was willing. Because the mime troupe needed to raise bail money and needed to raise defense money and then needed to raise money to pay the fine. Mind you, his crime was performing in the park without a permit. So besides the fact that law got kind of scuttled, I believe, or at least for a while, the need to raise money made people in the troupe talk about, well, let's, having a fundraiser, and some had the idea of, how about these new rock bands that are coming up in San Francisco, this new, what do they call it, psychedelic sound, And why don't we do, a big dance party? And so we can do it in the Mime Troupe studio, which was at that time on Howard Street. And so they did. Now, mind you, the business manager was 100% against doing this. He thought it was a terrible idea. He thought he came from San Francisco State, as did many of the other young actors and people in the troupe at the time. And he thought if we're a theater company, we should be doing theater. Right? Why do we piggyback off of these rock bands, and who cares? But as all the people began filing in and paying their money to see these bands, which included the then new Jefferson Airplane and I think Quicksilver Messenger Service, and a group called the Warlocks, one of whose band members was a member of the Mime Troupe, and who I believe had pushed for them to do this. The Warlocks had to change their name because they found out just before going on that there was another company called the Warlocks. So they changed their name to the Grateful Dead. And that was their first concert as the Grateful Dead. And the business manager, watching all of these people buying their tickets and everything, this guy named Bill Graham, kind of changed his mind about the idea of presenting rock shows. In fact, he went right out and took out a lease on the Fillmore Auditorium. And shortly thereafter left the mime troupe for, who knows, some other career in another business. But that's another way in which the mime troupe inspired and contributed to the growth of culture in the area, because those first three benefits, mime troupe benefits, were the beginning of psychedelic rock concerts. And I think with the first liquid projections, but I'd have to check that. So, that's a little bit here to set the scene. And I think that is all, probably more than I really have time for. So I'm going to now introduce one of the major creative figures who came into the mime troupe toward the end of the 60s, but who saw mime troupe work a lot during the 60s, and who contributed to mime troupe work and was closely associated with a member of the mime troupe, who will talk about the 60s and carry us on through the 70s. But first, to talk about the 60s, here is, for 30 years, the mime troupe's premier playwright, Joan Holden.
In the summer of 1967, if you were here and you were turned on and tuned in to the counterculture, you probably spent New Year's Day on the Polo Grounds at the Great Human Being with thousands of others bravely committing civil disobedience by smoking pot sitting on the grass. And you were either a hippie or a politico. For us, politicos, it wasn't the summer of love. It was the summer of massive troop buildup in Vietnam. My husband then, Arthur Holden, was an actor in the Mime Troupe, and I was a groupie ever since I saw The Dowry, the show that featured Joe, who was supposed to be here, but got left by his ride, I think. When you went to the actors' workshop in those days, you expected to see people, they're doing Brecht, Beckett, Arthur Miller, Genet. You expected to see people in gray or brown street clothes sitting around a kitchen table suffering an existential crisis. At this midnight show of the R.G. Davis Mime Troupe, you came down the stairs and heard singing, clapping, and stomping to the music of drums, recorder, and castanets. And you entered the theater, and the actors are grooving in front of the stage. That's them putting out more energy than a whole Broadway chorus. And their costumes hit you with 1,000 colors. On the stage, there's a platform with a bare platform with a painted curtain. And the music doesn't stop. They parade up onto the stage. The house doesn't go dark. The parade sweeps behind the curtain, but two actors stay downstage and trade jokes about the day's news. Till one of them turns into Pantalone, the paranoid miser kvetching about his ungrateful daughter. I don't use the word kvetching accidentally. In Commedia, in the Italian Commedia, every character came from a different region and spoke with a different regional accent. So in this country, accents are ethnic and ethnicity's touchy. So Luis cast, Pantalone was always spoke with a Yiddish accent. The low guy on the totem pole, always with an African-American accent. The high guy with a posh WASP accent, and everybody else sounded like Italo-Americans. Were they stereotypes? Absolutely, they were stereotypes. Stereotypes are really a great gift to a writer. because they're common property. You don't have to invent a special, individual, unique, private source of angst for every character. The first show that in the Commedia is Commedia dell'arte, means comedy by the prose. The characters of Commedia were developed and handed down by generation after generation of great actors until Molière and Goldoni began to put them on paper. They weren't writers' creation, they were performers' creation. The plot was always the old story of the father wants to marry his daughter to a rich old man, but she's in love with a beautiful young man, and the smart servant girl has to figure out a way to bring the lovers together for a happy ending. That's always a plot, and actors riffed off that plot. I think for the style of performance, you're going to get a sample of it from a show called Olive Pits that helped win the troupe its first Obie.
One side, punk. Pantalon, don't do anything hasty. Look at that woman, her skin.
This is the San Francisco Mime Troupe giving a free performance in one of San Francisco's public parks. Organized in 1959 by R.G. Davis, the Mime Troupe conceives of itself as a radical alternative to commercial theater, a guerrilla band that snipes at the conventions of middle-class America. Most of the people who see the Mime Troupe perform are ardent supporters, but some are shocked and offended by its irreverence. Its most prominent critic has been the San Francisco Park and Recreation Commission, which has tried unsuccessfully to bar the Mime Troupe from the city's parks. But the Mime Troupe's struggle to survive continues, without money, without the support or encouragement of the cultural establishment. The Mime Troupe's message, like that of the new generation for which it speaks, is try a different way of life. This film is about what it means to try.
Hold on. But you, my friends, you have been unappreciated. You are the real patrons of the arts, and you deserve to be paid. You must have some money, children. Have some money. After all, money must be spent. If there were no money, there'd be no rich. If there is no rich, there'd be no poor. No poor, there'd be no debt. No debt, no installment buying. No color TV, no washing machines. If there were no money, there'd be no church. No church, there'd be no God. If there was no God, there'd be no godless enemy. No godless enemy, no war. No war, no war economy. What the hell would we do with ourselves? Spend some money. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Two reminders. One, that we exist solely on your donations, so that as people come around, please drop something in the hat. Money, money! Second of all, that you can help us remain to play these free performances in the park by coming forward and signing our petitions, which will be on the stage. And then you can join the Mime Troupe and help us to undermine conventional attitudes toward money, morality, and sex. And that is a quote from Mr. Conway, the Vice President of the Park and Recreation Department.
Are you out to do that?
Yeah, of course we're out to do that. What would be the point otherwise?
You have license?
I mean, why settle for anything less? If you're an artist of any kind, you want to change people's lives, I think. And you can do that. You can do that by example, by the kind of life you lead. In other words, saying, I live this kind of life, it's a viable alternative, or you can do it in your work, or you can do both, and that's what we do.
That is the stuff that made me a groupie of the Mime Troupe in the 60s. Seeing that energy in the parks and everybody having a really great time doing it. And I was very jealous of the people, of the guys who, they were all men, who got to write it. Came 1967, in that Ronnie was looking for a writer. The way he always worked was he recruited left-wing writers, left-wing intellectuals to write, to adapt traditional material. After my first experience with Commedia, seeing Commedia, I saw the minstrel show, Civil Rights in a Cracker Barrel, which started with it was a blackface minstrel show. It exposed America's race problem in the form of a blackface minstrel show, a racist form to deal with racism. The show opened with 6 minstrels in blackface, big white eyes and mouth, doing cakewalk and a darky song with tambourines, sorry. It started like that, in this absolutely traditional way. There was a white interlocutor interrogating the minstrels. Mr. Bones, how long were you in Canada? Same as I is here, 6'3", ha, 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 and all the minstrels crack up. And the audience is really embarrassed and uptight, going, I'm not supposed to think this is funny. But it was very, very funny. It goes on like that with that kind of material through sketches through American history, starting with Crispus Attucks, the black man who was the first martyr of the American Revolution. And what happens in the sketch is that the founding fathers use him as a human shield. Booker T. Washington visits the White House, and Teddy Roosevelt hands him a broom. In the last sketch, 2 kids are goofing off on a street corner in Harlem, and a white cop comes along, and it ends, naturally an Irish cop, and it ends with the cop shooting the kid. The house goes absolutely silent. Then the music comes back. The actors take their bows and they peel off the fright wigs and the white gloves, and it turns out that 3 are black and 3 are white. That show made the Mime Troupe's name. It played in New York for one night and got written about all over the country because it was so smart. And I wished, like anything, that I could write something like that. Well, in that summer of '67, with the escalation of the war, Ronnie wanted to turn a Goldoni commedia, L'amante militare, the soldier turned lover, to be a satire on the war in Vietnam. And Arthur told him I could write. I wasn't so sure myself. And the show has the usual commedia plot, the father, the daughter, the lovers, but the situation was tailor-made, just made to order. The Spanish army was occupying Italy, and Pantalone thinks that he sees big contracts coming his way if he can marry his daughter to the Spanish commander. So he looks like LBJ, and it was no problem to make him speak like LBJ because I read the newspapers every morning. And this is a few months before the Tet Offensive, when the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese staged simultaneous attacks all over the South. And the North Vietnamese are wheeling rockets, preparing for this by wheeling rockets on bicycles down the Ho Chi Minh Trail under cover of night. Johnson and McNamara are telling the country we're on the verge of victory. We're about to bring freedom to a poor, underprivileged country whose people are rejoicing that we are on the verge of victory. We will soon bring our boys home. That's what you were hearing every day. It was a long time. It wasn't until 1975 that they started to come home. So with Olive Pitts, the troupe made a big sensation in New York with this anti-war show. downtown, and uptown, Olive Pits played once in Central Park. And for this, we won an Obie for uniting theater and revolution and grooving in the parks. The Mime Troupe then was not a collective. It was Ronnie's company. He had the ideas, he had the spark, he had the energy. He always had a million ideas. And everybody, you wanted to be in his gang because it was very attractive. And it ran on his charm and his energy. He made you willing and eager to go put on beggar's rags and really grotesque makeup and go get arrested in North Beach for Christmas caroling without a permit. That kind of stuff. But in 1969, the idea he had was to do an unknown Bertolt Brecht play translated into English by a Latvian, 3 hours long in the parks, and audiences vaporized. And a faction rose up in the company, in the gang, opposed to one-man rule. They were Maoists. And they were heavy into smashing everything, smash the state, smash monogamy, smash male leadership. It was very, the fights were really exhausting, and Ronnie took a leave of absence and flew to Japan, but not without issuing one final directive, which was that the show in 1970 should be about women's liberation. It was the right show at the right time. I'm giving Ronnie the credit for the idea. And we were now a collective, and we had a hit. The war was still going on. And our business manager, Michael Nolan, brought in the galleys of an article that was about to appear in Ramparts, The New Opium War. They revealed that the authors were banning Garrett and Frank Browning, and they revealed that the CIA was running drugs because the dope trade was the major source of funding for the anti-communist forces in all of Indochina, in Laos and Cambodia, as well as Vietnam. And by then, there was a new president of Vietnam, Ng Cao Ky, the Air Force general. He was at the very center of the spider web there. So, priceless. Obviously, a noir mystery we should do. We're all sitting around the meeting room, and Sharon Lockwood says, "Terry and the Pirates." That was a World War II era comic strip with hero airmen. And we have to have the Dragon Lady. The Dragon Lady there was a continuing character in the strip called the Dragon Lady. I believe Andrea, the Dragon Lady, is with us tonight.
Thank you, Joan, darling, and we are always hot. Okay, Joan, darling, thank you. With you, I never know if we're playing the Catskills or doing a lecture for Osher lifelong learning. God, what am I smoking? Blossom! Blossom!
What is it now, Mrs. D? Are you feeling okay? Oh.
Thank you, Blossom. Thank you.
All better now?
Yes, Blossom.
You know, Mrs. D, my name isn't...
Current best practice Reality is what the patient says it is.
Right.
Yes. Darling, it's your time to go on. It's your scene, the scene. Wrong Q has agreed to help the ambassador clean up the drug trade in Long Pin by shutting down the White Monkey Bar. In exchange, he gets to be president for life. Why don't we pretend that you are a white girl who is doing her gap year abroad? Places! Blossom! Bring me my tranquilizers.
Madam, General Ron Q is going to shut us down.
I know.
We've got to do something.
Count this. I find it has a soothing effect.
If I were you, I would kill the Viper before he killed me. I happen to know that the General is on his way here now to say he is your friend.
How grotesque! Bring me my headache box.
Pretty strong for a headache, don't you think?
Go and see if that's my headache coming on now.
Surprised to see me, Frau.
Oh, look, the perpetual puppet. I mean, president at the White Monkey Bar.
I have good news.
Did they offer you the throne?
Perhaps they are going to make him the first Asian pope.
What a charming young girl, always laughing and joking. What a pity. Dragon Lady, I wish to see you alone.
Blossom, go play with your dolls. So, Toad, you've returned.
I could not stay away.
You make me sick.
Oh, you hate me. I can tell. Go on, hate me. I deserve it.
This is not a screen test, Q. What do you want from me?
What do I want? I want the fire of your breath, the cold caress of your talons, the blinding gleam of your shoe. I want us to kill the ambassador.
So, the worm has turned.
Yes,
Now you want the ambassador dead.
that's right.
What's in it for you, Q?
Oh, a new weapon, X90, the disease fatal to our Asians.
Have you lost what little mind you have?
No, simply I am no longer Asian.
Oh, come off it, Q.
No, the agency assured me. And as soon as I have this weapon, I will have total victory. Oh, as soon as we kill the ambassador.
What do you mean, we, white man? I'm going to kill you, Q.
No, what about my plan?
I prefer mine. Say goodbye to rainbows,
No,
egg creams,
no.
and the monsoon season you love so well.
Wouldn't you rather kill Dilsey?
Dilsey?
Yes,
No,
Dilsey.
it can't be.
It is.
The
Clyde Dilsworth Junker II, the new American ambassador.
The only man who ever crossed me and lived. At last, fate has brought us together. My revenge must be exquisite.
And the young officer that you enchanted last evening.
The kid?
His name is Clyde Dillsworth Junker the Third.
His son?
Yes.
Heavy.
Heavy, yes.
Oh. Come to me, my handsome devil. In the words of my good friend Henry Kissinger, power is the ultimate aphrodisiac.
Oh, now, Frou-Frou.
Now.
Yes.
Ah! Ah! Ah!
Oh, tell me, Frou-Frou. Oh, how are you going to do it?
I think we'll invite His Excellency to a special celebration.
A party? Oh, what a very good idea. Yes, it is a very good idea. But there's only one problem. Blossom, she knows too much.
You're making a bad mistake.
See you at the party, Frou-Frou.
At the White Monkey Bar.
In 1976, I was at that point like a freelance bass player in Berkeley, and I had a gig at the Long Branch with an all-girl band called Delicia and the Darvons. So I noticed that the audience was entirely stoned on beer and Seconal. And I realized I didn't need to be there, and I had witnessed the passing of this unique coalescence of hormones and consciousness, and it was now over. Fortunately, the next day, I got a call from Barry Levitan, drummer with the Troupers, said, "You want to play bass?" So I went over, had a meeting with the company. They wanted a year's commitment. I gave them 6 months and stayed 35 years. So. I would like to introduce the song, and the people who are going to sing it here. The first year I was in the troupe, we did False Promises, Nos Engañaron, and we took that to Europe. And on the end of that tour, with a contract from the French Cultural Department, those are the days, man. I mean, we got 3 weeks in La Rochelle put up to create this play. And it went through a couple of stages. Well, the first version was in French with not a lot of words. And but I did have this song, which has lived on for quite a while. Anyway, I would like to now present Andrea Snow, Wilma Bonet, and Eduardo Robledo doing We Won't Move.
Come on, Gladys, we gotta get out of here.
I'm staying right here. I won't move.
You want to move?
I won't move.
She won't move.
I won't move. Been moved before. I won't move no more. They'll have to carry me out the door. I won't move. My city was people, not concrete. Parking lots and cars were the only things on the street. Been there so long, had friends all around. Then the man comes and he tears it down, and he leaves me with nothing but a memory of how my city used to be. He built a lot of nothing that nobody needs. Can you show me the reason? Can you show me the rhyme? Got nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. I won't move this time.
Oh, well, that's the silliest thing I ever heard. She won't move. I mean, that's ridiculous. You won't move. She won't move. I won't move.
¿Cómo que I won't move? Estas viejas están bien locas. The landlord is gonna come. They're gonna get in a big fight. I won't move.
We won't move. We won't move. We won't move. Been moved before. We won't move no more. They'll have to carry us out the door. We won't move. Our city is people, not concrete. Parking lots and cars are the only things on our street. Lived here so long, got friends all around. Now
Won't let the man
come and tear it down. We won't move. We won't move. We won't move. We won't move. We won't move.
So the 80s were a time when, the women's movement, like she had said earlier, had really started to be strong and all that, but there were still some issues going on there. White women and black women were really just starting to get on the same page because white women were burning their bras and shit, but I need my bra. So we kind of had to get on the same page with what that meant to be a feminist and what that meant to be on the comedy scene, because really it was quite a white male venture for a long time. So the group that I was really excited about was the National Theater of the Deranged. I don't know how many of you saw that group, but yeah, hey, it was a really amazing group. We took real topics from the news and we did comedy. Well, when you take topics from the news, you don't really have to write much. Improv is the perfect venue for it because everything was so crazy and there was so much going on that we were able to cover that. But it was important at that time as a woman to be on the scene because there were other groups that were happening, wonderful groups all around it. There were women's groups, there was FemProv, there was all these groups that were happening. And I really wanted and really made a statement, I think, by being, a woman in this group because it was a lot of white guys, fabulous guys, but we had some flavor. We had Asians, we had blacks, we had Kelvin Han Yee, we had Ron Muriera, we had me, we had Judy Nihei, we had Debbie Durst. So there were a lot of people on the scene who were just starting to be heavy in there, and so it was really a fabulous time to be there. And now we're in such a midst of things that are tumultuous, and we're kind of against each other in so many ways right now. But back then, there were a lot of people who were trying to get together, who the 80s were a time we were trying to pull it together. Politically correct was kind of good, but kind of not. What side did you fall on in politically correct? Who did you insult that day? It was kind of one of those things where people were treading lightly, and at the same time, we were going kind of deep. Some of the stuff that we covered, because it was seriously and in the news, it was just a matter of us taking our take. And I really appreciated being in that group. It made a huge difference in what it meant to be on the comedy scene, because when I wanted to start doing stand-up, they were like, well, you don't tell jokes. And that's true. I don't really tell jokes. I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. I can bring a room together by telling a great story. And so that was my comedy style, and I finally had to beg the comedy clubs. One day I just made phone calls. I was like, look, book me for a week. If I don't make people laugh, I'll never, ever call you again. That's a good offer, right? It's like, I'm either gonna get this bitch off my tail, or she's gonna rock the room. Well, I rock the room, y'all. That's right. And stand-up still remains very close to my heart, but my passion, my love is definitely improv. It's where my heart sits, and it's where I learned to be in the world and walk my own path by letting people know what I felt, what our group meant, how to interact, and how to be together. So I would like to just end my little portion here of the 80s with some improv. So now, back in the day, there was, poetry, right? It's gotten to a crazy-ass place now, hasn't it, people? They're calling it spoken word. I'm not sure why. And everybody thinks they're really, really good. It's gotten to the point where you can just walk into a coffee shop and go, "Good morning. I'll have a latte and a shitty little poem, please." And somebody will actually give you a shitty little poem. So I would like to do one of my characters that I do embrace the street poets. And so this character, her name is Dadisi. She is your homeless street poet. That's right. So I'm going to ask you for suggestions, things from the 80s that you love, things that remember from the 80s, anything that you'd like this poem to be about. And I'll take the first 2 or 3 things that I hear clearly. And then hold on, baby. And then Dadisi will come out and improvise the poem. So it's hard to hear, but I'll take what I hear, the first 3. Okay, go. What? Shoulder pads. Ah, yes, and? Madonna and? Reagan's brain. Love you, thank you. Please welcome your street poet, Dadisi. Thank you. Oh. My name is Dadisi, and this is my poem on shoulder pads, Madonna, and Reagan's brain. Now, you might wonder when you leave the house today, hey, what am I going to do? And are my shoulder pads straight? Important. Because if you walk through the world tilted, you might understand who you are. You might be just in line with Reagan's brain, tilted. And yet, if your shoulder pads aren't big enough, then they don't take you seriously enough, so you have to say to yourself, hold on, I'm Madonna, bitch. But people look at you and say, you're not Madonna, and you say, I am Madonna in my head. When I wake up, I'm Madonna, but when I go to sleep, I feel like I got Reagan's brain. What's wrong? What contributed to the fact that I'm feeling that is maybe I had too much bacon, the nitrates, but I'm not really sure why I would say that, because Madonna probably doesn't eat bacon, because if you eat bacon, then you're wearing some shoulder pads. And if your shoulder pads are too big, what did you do? You cut them out, but what did you do? You cut out a part of yourself. And you say, why don't they cut out a part of Reagan's brain? We're not sure why. And yet Madonna was singing her heart out. We were feeling her, and she was absolutely the one that we wanted to be. Yet our hair was big, but we weren't sure if we were supposed to be big. And is a big brain supposed to be a big brain if it's swollen? Reagan's brain. And yet the things that his brain was swollen with were things that we really wanted to embrace. We were merely trying to get around, have enough hairspray, enough shoulder pads to walk through the world with confidence. Yet we didn't want to play football. Feel that? Because if you play football, your shoulder pads become an armor as opposed to a fashion statement. And then the clothes don't hang right anyway because you got on shoulder pads that are too big for you and you're trying to hurt people with them. Stop. If you're looking to hurt people, just have people sitting around trying to figure out what is in Reagan's brain. That was always a party stopper. That's when the weed was really good because you needed to really get your brain right so you can be right for when Reagan's brain wasn't right. Do you feel what I'm saying? And in a way, while we were trying to figure out Reagan's brain, we were all just shouldering up, trying to put on the pads that made us comfortable when we walked through the world. And all we had to do was hold on to Madonna. Thank you.
My name is Barry Shabaka Henry. Some of you may know me as the creator of the role of Fact Wino, a member of the troupe from 1980, the end of 80 to the last performance I did was in 1988. Incredible time in my life. Reagan was president, and we had a lot of material as a result of it. And I would just like to say that I wish I could be there tonight to share in this great celebration. 60th anniversary of the San Francisco Mime Troupe. You are an important entity in our culture, and I hope that the citizens of our nation of like mind support you so you can survive for another 160 years. Happy birthday, San Francisco Mime Troupe.
In Fact Wino meets the moral majority, the Mime Troupe introduced an audience to two of their most famous characters, Fact Wino, a working class superhero with the amazing power to make people think, and Armageddon Man, the musical embodiment of the military-industrial complex. Written by Joan Holden, Henry Picciotto, Peter Sullivan, and T.D. Matthews, with music and lyrics by Bruce Barthel. Fact Wino versus the Moral Majority was so popular, Fact Wino went on to star in 2 other Mime Troupe shows, while Armageddon Man, well, he did get a good song. And here it is as it was performed by Bruce Barthel and Dan Chumley from the 1981 production of Faction Meets the Moral Majority.
Earth and its inhabitants, surrender your riches to me. Let humanity cower in fright, puny insects before my boundless power. I command the most lethal war machine in history. You see that button? I see that button. With that button, I can destroy the whole world! No! Don't blow it up yet! I'm not through with it! Okay, but I am invincible! It helps to have a friend in the White House. Yes, to the president! No. To the people who made it all possible. Oh, you mean the 50% who didn't vote? No. I was thinking of our shock troops, the good little soldiers of God. They fought our battle at election time. If they didn't exist, we'd have had to invent them. Ah, yes, to the moral majority. Oh, that's good booze, yeah. Yes, yeah. Can you guess just who we are? One part business, one part war. We have the weapons, banks, and land. Call us Armageddon Man. There is less, but we want more, so we take it from the poor. You can't stop us, no one can, because we're Armageddon Man. Karl Marx predicted our demise, but it's on crisis that we try. Must it find a new market or a war will do, and we'll see our historic mission through. Well, even though our race is almost run, when we are through, you'll all be done. And what we don't use up will blow away on that Armageddon day. The world, we're number one. We'll win the war that can't be won. You won't survive it, no one can. Thanks to Armageddon Man. Thanks to Armageddon Man. Thanks to Armageddon Man.
Founded in 1984. Yes. By Renee Yanez in the Mission. It will be back at Berkeley Repertory Theater this spring. in their political satire and brand of social justice. Here is the principal writer and co-founder, Richard Montoya.
Good evening, buenas noches, everybody. How are we? Moving along? Miss Amos, brilliant as always. I'm about to do a poem. A spoken word, Latino style. I wanted to come out and do a little dance because I wanted Joan to see a Culture Clash member dance and have a smile before the apocalypse hits us. And the brown children are exited from the cages of which Stephen Miller is keeping them in. See, we're angry right now. We're very angry. And we want to say, die, Trump fucker, die. That cost me $10 right now. And live, Bernie Weiner, live, the little Bernie man. We love Bernie and Mr. Herowitt. Having him here tonight and keeping that pace moving is really beautiful. We're doing a wonderful job tonight. I wanted to dance because it's nerve-wracking being backstage right now. It's like a night of 100 not-for-profit stars back there. And Ed Holmes and bumping into Calvin and Durst is back there and Miss Amos and I'm extremely nervous, but I grounded myself. There's the world's largest supply of hummus is backstage right now. Fucking bathtubs full of hummus, and it's everyone is dutifully eating it because it's Palestinian hummus from Berkeley, and you don't want to not eat Palestino. Viva los Palestinos de Berkeley, and the people that brought the hummus were Chilean Sherpas from the Berkeley Hills, so. To be fair, I have to say Happy New Year, Viva la Rosh Hashanah to my friends, my tribe. Viva la Ramadana, ding dong to everybody else. Fuck all religions, we gotta keep moving, we gotta keep the night going. I get confused, not Tony Tacconi's retirement. Joan is continuing writing, so, que viva la mujer, yes. And tonight, I want it to be a little bit nostalgic. If we go to the piano by Omar Sosa, very lightly underneath me, Taylor. How about a round of applause for the technicians working their asses off tonight? Thank you, Taylor. Wolfie. Wolf. Mr. Wolf. Mr. Taylor. And young ladies backstage are running all this stuff. It's quite a show back here. And I wanted tonight to get just a little bit nostalgic with a nice piano underneath me, providing a bed. And I wanted to remember you all to a couple of friends of ours in Senor Jack Wicker. Yeah, that's right. And Senor Rene Yanez. And I was feeling a bit melancholy because I was a melancholic-y baby. But Senor Jack, Lucky Jack, bien amigo, full of Pancho and Lefty type fantastical stories of wisdom and bluster tonight. In fact, I'm wearing my lucky greens. I know I look like I'm a waiter at a Mexican restaurant, but tonight I'm wearing my lucky greens for every Irish boy and girl who ever walked to the mission, even Mission High and Lowell Cherries for that matter, the alma mater of Dianne Feinstein, and for all the Irish Catholic kids whose daddies may have worked at Bethlehem Steel. While mother made tortillas, it was the mission after all. Those Irish mothers slapping together tortillas. And whose uncles and aunties drank too much and yelled too much at Clooney's or the Dover Club, where now they fucking put Red Bull in Irish whiskey, which is a fucking Irish sin. The San Patricios. I don't know why I do this. I'm still crossing myself out of habit. But when you start your academic life at the elementary school of our Sister of Sorrows, you're pretty much ensured you're going to have a fucked up life. Hang on, Clooney's. Hang on, Clooney's. Put that Red Bull away. Come on, give me one last honest white man bar in the mission. Even I'm pulling for that, okay? And what I got from Jack Wicker, Montoya. And I went to his boathouse and I said, Jack, I'm going to be a theater artist. I've made a vow of poverty. He said, my son, go forth. And today at China Basin felt a little sad. The thriving, moving, technical people buzzing in Mission Creek. And I remember the days of pork chop night. I went to one. I never made a poker night, but I was there with Jack in his boathouse in Mission Creek that he loved so much. It came all the way from Mission Dolores down. And when the Giants were really giving it to the Dodgers, I managed to be at his house. But I'm sorry they didn't send off Bochy and Bumgardner a little bit better this season. Jack, but your beloved Giants there, huh? And the night you came to the first preview of Zorro in Hell at the Berkeley Rep with Sharon Lockwood and the Culture Clash boys, you and Jack Davis came looking for me backstage, scaring the hell out of everybody. Where's Montoya? Where's Montoya? And Jack Wicker had notes and kindness, and he said, you really got me with the coyote part. And I said, the Peter Coyote part? And he said, no, the no place for the four-leggeds to roam. I really liked that part. It showed us that the coyote and the wild ones are trapped. And I said, well, isn't that really happening to Peter Coyote too? And he said, Jack was way ahead of everything. The communes prepared him for the gender-free bathrooms. It would crop up all over South of Market. Though the current Miho 2 moment would have provided navigational challenges for him and safe spaces and emotional triggers. We're calling ourselves Latinx, so we never have to say the word Chicano again. And he delighted in his early California history, Mr. Wicker, a talented trumpet player, and he always knew and could tell me the story that Dojaro was ripped off and Fremont was a butcher and Vallejo was a tragedy because so many Chicano mission artists would move there. And he loved that El Camino Real, the Hollywood Freeway, the 101 ended in East LA. El Camino Real. It ends in Hollywood. And so the Father Junipero Serra statue on the 280 is really leaning forward and saying, here's my headshot. And it came with a warning. He said, young man, this is Jackie talking to you. Careful, Hollywood sucks, but it can swallow. Fucking grow up. 1959, year of your birth, SF Mime Troupe, and year of my birth. And 2 weeks after I was born in San Diego at a naval hospital, we find the first Chicanos in Berkeley on Telegraph Avenue. That's my father, Jose Montoya, his brother Malaquias Montoya. Queso Torres, the first Chicanos in 59 on Telegraph, puts us in the orbit of Jack Wicker. Rene Yanez is still a few years away serving his military service. Jack Wicker served in the military. These guys took their GI Bills and they went to art school, CCAC in Oakland. And the driftwood sculptures in the beaches of Emeryville, they started that shit, all right? We got to plant that flag in 59. The beats are all around. The beats and the heat and the street and the first empathetic acts of political love start there, 59. Telegraph, San Francisco, here, Mime Troupe. And then one day, Jackie baby, when they open up the books, the Great American Songbook, there you are, an Irish-American kid from the mission singing De La Chow, De La Chow, De La Chow, 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 with Esteban Villa and Jose Montoya and the rest of the Royal Chicano Air Force from Sacramento. The farm sowed seeds of Burning Man. Jerry Garcia walked in the mission in the rain. You took me to the Hunt's Donut Shop, Jack. You took me, okay, to see the Nicaraguan revolutionaries and the junkies. And we jumped on the Mission number 14 bus to where we find our legacy, our definition, our marrow. After we cut to the bone from the losses of you and Renee there in our marrow, we find you. We find you, Jack Davis, Jack Wicker, Renee Ñañez, in the waters of the Upper Klamath, hasta el Rio de Sacramento, the beach, the street, the heat. You pulled me in. You pulled our coats to the fact that Mexico City Blues was published in 1959. You taught me, Wicker, to sing Le Internacional, the restlessness. You and Renee, all of that. Joan taught us, Dolores taught us, Cesar, Valdez, Arthur Chumley, okay? The Dead, Bill Graham, Robert Hunter himself, Sam Shepard, okay? The Magic Theater, whatever. Brownsville Girl with the Brownsville Curl, Lockwood, Robledo, Shabaka, Acosta Colon, Freeman, Oropesas, Joaquin, still a badass, and here tonight. The Secrets, in the Sand, in the Day. Chumley humbled me when I walked in, a sense of entitlement. I auditioned for a dictator sometime in the mid-'80s, and he said, "Kid, don't come back here until you have a song and a monologue and a story and a dance." And Chumley put the show in the business. Any film I ever got, I have to thank Chumley for that humbling day, and yet still he was humble. And Secrets in the Sand, I saw it at Dolores Park. We can't pay La Victoria Theater. There, our social justice, we find it. Our socialized cannabis clubs, we find them. Yes, we find them all. And we say to ourselves, oh my God, Jack, fare thee well, carnal, fare thee well. Exit stage left, you brilliant shadow cloud specter. Hasta la victoria siempre. Gracias.
Richard Montoya! All right, moving on. Here we go. We are now at 1985. Never a group to do the expected. In 1984, the troupe produced their play, 1985, a nightmare of a play in which the question, fighting against the power really worth it? Isn't it better to just sleep? Besides the obvious, hell no, and written by the collective with music and lyrics by Bruce Berthal, the troupe gave the audience examples of all the oppression being during Reagan's morning in America. In this scene, our lead is serenaded by three of our most faithful dictators. Here are Melesio Magdaleo as Ferdinand Marcos, Audrey Smith as Mobutu Seko, and Dan Chumley as Augusto Pinochet in 1985.
America is the best country. Sí. Hey, we're glad to see ya. Come on and say hi. We're the best friends that your money can buy. We're glad to be working for the US of A. We're fighting for freedom and getting paid. Umbala, umbala, umbala! Patrice Lumumba was a very bad man. He took the Congo from the Belgian hands. Mr. Lumumba, him go away with help from yours truly and the CIA. We're glad to see ya. Come on and say hi. We're the best friends that your money can buy. We're glad to be working for the US of A. We're fighting for freedom and getting paid. Mr. Aquino got what he deserved. Don't know why everyone's so concerned, but I don't care what anyone say. I got Yankee soldiers in the Subic Bay. Hey, we're glad to see ya. Come on and say hi. We're the best friends that your money can buy. We're glad to be working for the US of A. We're fighting for freedom and getting paid. Salvador Allende, he make me sick. He tried to take the money away from the rich. He wouldn't surrender, so I flew him away with help from the AFL-CIA. With help from the AFL-CIA. Frank Carter, he was some kind of red. Always worried about the tortured or dead. This administration, things are better than before. We don't even have to say we're sorry anymore. We're glad to see you, American kind. Best friends that your money can buy. Fighting for freedom and getting paid. Marcos, and Pinochet. Marcos, and Pinochet. Marcos, and Pinochet.
So the Mime Troupe was always way ahead of its time, as you see, and also right in the midst of the times and translating the times and pushing them into the future. And that video there and bits of Armageddon Man and Shabaka's performances all give you a sense of why it was that the San Francisco Mime Troupe became the second San Francisco company, Bay Area company, to win a Tony Award, which it did right around this time. A lot of people said, what? The Mime Troupe? Tony Awards go to, you know, ACT and the Mark Taper Forum and the American Repertory Theater and all the big guys. And it was very unusual for a small company, a collective company, a radical company to win, and there's a good reason for that. The reason is that the Tony Award for regional theater, which is what the Mime Troupe won, is voted upon not by the regular Tony Award voters, but by the members of the American Theater Critics Circle. Consequently, the members of the American Theater Critics Circle, which are spread out all over the country, are going to generally come up with a company that has some kind of a national profile. So it's either a major regional theater or it's a company that tours, which is where the Mime Troupe came in. So a few local critics, including Bernie Weiner of the Chronicle and myself at the time, we were actually the people who nominated, wrote up the official nomination. We tried for about 3 years, and each year we would put it forward. And as the Mime Troupe would tour, more people, as it had been nominated for several years in a row, more critics around the country thought, oh, okay, I better check this one out because it keeps cropping up on our nomination sheet each year. And so the third year, we nailed it. And we were very, very happy. We were thrilled. We were probably more thrilled than the members of the Mime Troupe, although they put up a pretty good show of being pleased. And they do tend to mention it from time to time, but they had, of course, already won a couple of Obies and received a fair amount of national attention. And this was a segment where I was supposed to tell you about the Tony, and that's all you're going to hear about the Tony Award. And I'm going to now turn the stage back over to Bruce Barthol, who's going to give you an introduction to Seeing Double.
Seeing Double is the Mime Troupe's attempt to deal with the Israel-Palestine question, which no one on the left could touch until the Palestinian National Congress voted that Israel had a right to exist. So that was a big change and a big hopeful moment. We had the most incredible writing team, which compares them an Israeli, a Palestinian, an Israeli-Palestinian, an Israeli Arab, as they're called, and a bunch of Yankees, Jews and non-Jews. And this was like a Mid-East peace conference that went on, and we actually we were able to put a play together. Joan is the lead writer, but with these other people, and it worked. And unfortunately, we thought about rewriting it and remounting it. But the situation is so much worse than it was in 1989 and 1990. So let's venture back to those hopeful times. And I'd like to introduce the man who sang it originally, Michael Sullivan, along with Keiko Shimasato and Rebecca Klingler.
There's an image on the screen again.
We can hear the sounds of screams again.
We can see the face of rage again.
And the tears